Welcome, listeners, to www.IronRadio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening. Hey, everybody. Without further ado, here is a bonus episode and simulcast of Iron Radio. This is a full-length episode that you will see occasionally here on the Nutrition Radio Network. Enjoy.
We're watching the big picture, friend. We know the score.
Good morning, everybody. Another episode of Iron Radio. This is Phil Stevens. I'm a coach, a powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, and training for boxing.
Nice. This is Dr. Mike Nelson, associate professor at the Carrick Institute, creator of the Flex Diet certification, which opens again June 5th, 2023 until June 12th. Go to flexdiet.com for all the info.
This is Coach Jarrell with Strength Guild Lifting. I have the only Strength Guild facility left at this point. Weightlifting, some powerlifting, strongman, got it all at our facility.
That's cool. And I am Lonnie Lowry. I'm a scientist, consultant, nutritionist, former competitive bodybuilder. All around nerd, I guess.
All around strength nerd.
Strength nerd.
So what do we got on news? Anything on going on in the strength field? I haven't seen anything. But
can I ask, Jarrell? You said you're the only strength guild left. What? I've been out of the loop. What's going on with that?
I shut my gym down.
Oh my God! I did not know this.
Yeah, I shut my gym down it was last August. Because,
oh my God!
Yeah, so to explain to you, basically we went to my son's birthday. We always take him on a float trip. And we did that, and driving back, I was like, man, I need more time of this. Like, I was missing time. He was joining wrestling, and my daughter's in boxing, and I had missed enough of that stuff. And so I gave the gym people a month and said, I'm done. And I still coach people. I still have my gym. I didn't sell anything.
Oh, I see.
I have it all. And I still coach people, most of them at a distance. And we, whittled the gym down, kept the equipment, put a bunch of it upstairs in storage just to have more room in my warehouse. And so most of my people moved to online training, and it has freed me up. So I was able to, all during wrestling season, I went and helped the wrestling team. So I was helping people where my kids were. And now my kids joined boxing, so guess what I did? I'm now training for a fight. So
yeah.
Just doing more of that, just helping the kids and being part of what they're doing. So, and
right on.
Part of that deal that I've always preached, lead by example. I can't expect my son and daughter to go in there and box and me sit. I'm not the parent that'll sit on the sidelines and tell them to work fucking harder. While I sit on my ass. I got in there with them. And, so I had my first sparring match last week, and I successfully blocked 100% of the punches. 84% of them I blocked with my face. So it was fun. It's been a good time getting in there and doing different things and being more of a part of their stuff. And that's what I'm looking to do more in the future, more of what Jim does, Windler. And just, I'm donating my time to help this stuff, help the kids and whatever I can do to help them. And it also allows me to spend more time seeing my daughter's 15 now. She's going to be a sophomore. And it's where did that time go?
That's so crazy.
It's so fast. And it's I'm going to miss all this shit. And I wanted more of that. So, and like I said, I kept all the equipment because who knows, the doors might open again when they get older. And I wasn't going to sell all this expensive ass shit for pennies on the dollar. It's why?
Right.
I don't need money. I'm keeping it. So
basically, I'm the one still dumb enough to do this. So that's basically.
Yep. So that's where it's at. But
I get it. Yeah, I've talked to a lot of strength coaches who are long hours, man. You got to love what you're doing.
You do. And I loved it, and I still love coaching, but I didn't love it more than seeing my kids' athletic events.
Yeah.
So
I feel that, man. The older I get, time is greater than money or almost anything else.
So Yep, that's the deal. But
Anything else in the strength world?
no, I mean, there's a couple. No, not really. Nothing we didn't talk about last week. So, a couple deadlifts, like people doing deadlifts and training, but no like world records broken or anything.
There's some world records in weightlifting.
Were there?
Yeah. Tian Chao, clean and jerk, at the Asian Games, and then his teammate, I forget how you pronounce his name, Shi Jingyong or something like that. I think he got total and snatch records in their weight class. And I don't know. I hadn't looked at the results from I think the Europeans have already passed. I haven't looked at all the results from that. And Lasha's still killing everyone. He didn't put up like a monster total, but he already has the lead. But yeah, those are the ones I remember. There's a couple like really light weight class records I was broken, but
I'm looking here. Lasha broke. So he broke the clean and jerk again.
yeah,
Is that right? Holy crap. Yeah. Okay. Has anybody matched? Did he match Terry Ankos yet?
No.
Okay. I wasn't
Because
sure.
Terry is because he basically everyone was going for the 600-pound clean and jerk,
Yeah.
and I actually think the clean and jerk is the farthest off. Like he'll snatch 500 before he clean and jerks. Which
That's still a crazy one.
The 500-pound snatches, and like as far as like strength events go, like snatching 500 pounds, I'll put up there like top 5 as far as like just a strength like of all time measured against even strongman performances, that kind of thing. I put it up there with that. I don't know if it's number 1, but it would be up there.
Yeah. You had a nutrition question for us, Lonnie.
Oh, yeah. This is something that's been going around for, I don't know, at least the last 2 years in what I keep seeing on a daily basis. I know Mike's probably seen a lot of this stuff, but there's a new article in the Current Developments in Nutrition. It's called Toward a Definition of Healthy Food. And I guess the feds are having a real hard time defining healthy. This is probably not surprising to you guys. Here's a little bit of background. It says recently the FDA proposed to redefine the concept of healthy, quote unquote, for regulatory purposes. To qualify as healthy, foods need to contain specific amounts of fruits, vegetables, dairy, and whole grains, with limits on added sugar, sodium, and saturated fat. And then it goes on to say, the new thinking may have arisen from the 2015 Kind petition. I think that's the Kind bar company. They sell like the nut bars and which argued that some foods perceived as healthy, like nuts and avocados and salmon, would be disqualified on the basis of some of these definitions, right? Like they're too high in fat or saturated fat or whatever. Yogurt, I guess, would be on that list. So my question to you guys is, because I think in the strength world, people are pretty attuned to nutrition stuff, and they all have their own opinions. Paleo, keto, high carb, low carb, whatever, plant based. I don't see that as much among lifters, but what's healthy? Because it feels like there's a lot of challenge, right, to try to do this. They want to put a little symbol on labels, right, that says healthy, a healthy food. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, that's a tough one to cross because I've seen people do so many different diets and they can all work. It depends on the individual. And I think that goes back to what you talked about several years ago, that I think the future of nutrition is going to be like due to your personal genetics. And because you look at it, makes sense. It makes sense if you look like Asian cultures who have eaten tons of rice for centuries versus Northern Europeans versus, so how is that going to boil down to be the next thing? Because I've seen people go on low carb diets and they flourish and their blood results are all great. And then I've seen other people and they don't do worth a shit on it. Mm-hmm. And then some people go more of a, low fat, higher carb type of thing. So I don't know. I think a lot of it boils down to what we've talked about a ton on here is like trying to have a diet that consists of single ingredient foods. And like, you can't go wrong there. Like an apple, rice, meat. It's hard to be unhealthy if you just pick out simple shit, whereas as opposed to a Twinkie or some kind of weird sausage that has 47 ingredients with 27 things you can't pronounce.
Right. Yeah. Clean label stuff, like 5 ingredients. You can pronounce them all.
Yeah. And the tough part with my tough part with anything coming out from like the FDA or whatever is like, what lobby paid for this study? Like this Kind Bar study. I mean, if like you can't tell me they're not skewed by millions of dollars pushed into this thing, or the recent push for like lab grown meat and things like that versus versus just a cow that's walking around.
I mean, is it possible to even get down to taking a food by itself and saying that it's healthy? Because like, let's say you even took apples, right? Universally understood as healthy, right? But if you just ate apples, well, that probably isn't healthy. So if you just had a single label for a food, can you even do it, period? Right? Like with just individualizing the term healthy and applying it to foods without additional context of a, the holistic diet approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually says here, these criteria were met by only 58% of fruits, 35% of vegetables, 8% of milk and dairy products, and 4% of grain products. So
yeah, you'd have like an impossible time convincing me that like salmon's bad for you. Yeah. Because it's too high in some fat. Or almonds,
Mm-hmm. Okay, but if you ate that, right? Like if you ate only what's on that list, would you be, I mean, I guess in terms of health, that seems to like waver in a lot of spaces at the moment, but what would that person even look like? If you put them on it for a year and they have you just follow strictly fed guidelines for everything. Exercise, that nutrition, and 1 to 3 years of that, like what would that person even look like? Would you look at that person and say, oh man, they're thriving in a health context? Because I'm going to tell you with the foods that you named, I guess my guess would be no, not really. Like,
yeah,
I think you would develop even probably some health problems from just that, just what you named so far on there, like the percentages of fruits, veggies, and
another thing we have to remember too is the context of what they're dealing with. They're talking about the population at whole, and they're not talking optimal for performance. Like if you took the average fucking American and gave them that diet, they'd probably be a lot better. But again, we're not talking optimal. That's the same thing as the medical field. Like doctors they don't know how to deal with athletes because that's not what they studied. It's like the story I told a couple times, and I think we talked about it last week when I was talking about it to somebody, maybe off the show. Like when I trained for that meet and I got up to 298, and I went to my doctor and she was like, "Oh my God, your blood levels are fucked." And like she wanted to put me on every medication, and I was like, "Wait a minute, give me like 6 weeks." And she's like, "There's no way nobody can change cholesterol numbers and things like that in 6 weeks." I was like, "You don't understand. Give me a chance." And I mean, she just didn't understand the amount. Like I was eating for 4 people and I was eating a lot of bad things, and I changed my blood work in 6 weeks, like drastically. And because they're not used to dealing with that, they don't deal with people that like I was force feeding quick shop burritos numerous times a day and things like that. Whatever it took to gain weight, they're not used to dealing with that population. And so going back to a good diet and losing 35 pounds, it was in a short amount of time, did drastic things to my blood. It's the same thing here. I mean, I don't think the FDA or whatever is talking optimal diet for performance and super health, they're talking a lot better than the average American, and something maybe they'll
general
follow.
Healthy
And easy to follow. So I think that's a difference. I don't think they're ever talking optimal health. So
yeah, it's good to have a discussion about this stuff, just because, if listeners see a label and it says healthy, I think a lot of people that are at least going to listen to this show are going to be like raising an eyebrow, right?
Yeah.
Like, all right, I'm going to choose. I'm going to decide what's healthy here.
Mm-hmm.
And, to be fair, the dietary guidelines for Americans, they talk about patterns. It's not an individual food in a box kind of thing. It's dietary patterns and that kind of stuff. And, I mean, there's a huge amount to unpack in this paper. So I just thought it was an interesting concept that they're trying to define this stuff. The one thing that I've really seen a focus on has been getting away from demonizing fat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're all old enough. You remember when you were kids, low fat, fat free. That's all it ever was.
Yeah.
Finally, they're going to let that go. Because to your point, Phil, almonds, salmon, like WTF, right?
Yeah.
And then added sugars is another one. But then, there's also a lot of negative attention to these artificial sweeteners and stuff like that too. I remember back in the day we asked Anthony Almada on this show, artificial sweeteners or sugar, and he just reflexively said sugar.
Yeah.
I don't want the fake stuff. But he probably also doesn't put 60 or 70 grams of sugar in his beverages.
Yes.
So yeah, but less fat demonizing and kind of turning the evil to sugar. But then, I almost feel like we haven't learned our lesson there either. Because to your point, Phil, I mean, there's populations, including people who exercise a lot. Sugar's just going to kind of feed into their glycogen economy. Their carbs in, carbs out, and they're burning a lot of it. So I don't think we want to demonize sugar necessarily either. I don't know. It's just complex.
No, I mean, that's like with the training I'm doing now. Like, tell me you're going low carb and then come into the gym with me and like throw punches and jump around for 2.5 hours straight. Right. I'd be zapped. No, one thing that's always interested me as far as the nutrition, I've never implemented, I just think it's interesting, would be especially people that are from like non-tropical climates, would be, because we always talk about a varied diet, and you've talked about it numerous times, like purposely going to the store and picking out new things. Like, I'm going to try this vegetable. Like, it'd be interesting to do like a seasonal diet. Like, what is growing right now, that's what I get to eat. Because that's what would have happened hundreds of years ago. Like, people in my area right here, like whoever the native people that lived here, like, what would they eat? They would eat what was at hand. And that would change throughout the year. So you'd have a winter of eating mainly meats and fats and things like that. And then spring would come and shit would start sprouting and your diet would go much more varied that way. Would that be optimal? I don't know, but it seems interesting.
Phil, that's like zero stress periodization. We talk about periodizing the diet. How about just let Earth do that for you?
Yeah, because now, I mean, unlike times of the past, like we literally have things at our grasp at all times. Like if I want an apple, I can have it year round. That didn't exist, and it makes sense. I mean, if you look at it, if you take a wide view of it, like you look at, like when does most shit grow and come to fruit? It's in the fall. What happens right after fall? Winter. So a lot of these people were able to gorge themselves before a long winter, keep themselves alive, put on some body fat, withstand the cold temperatures, withstand almost a fast because they were left with nothing but animals walking around.
Even calories.
Work hard to catch.
Right.
Yeah.
Calories would go down in the winter. Yeah, your intake.
You were kind of bear-like. You kind of fucking were able to gorge yourself for a semi-hibernation fast. Because there wasn't as much stuff in the winter. Would that be best? I don't know, but it seems interesting. I mean,
Mike, this sounds like being flexible with your diet. I don't.
Yeah, I mean,
that's your thing.
It's the same idea, right? There's actually a cool paper from, I want to say 2014 from Ray Croneiss called, was it the Metabolic Winter Hypothesis? And it's just a hypothesis paper. They don't have a ton of data. They've got some, accessory data there. But basically, that's their argument, that exactly what you were saying, that in the winter, especially if you're in a more northern climate, that you probably skew a little bit more towards a ketogenic diet, because you've got, some animals, you've got some meat, you've got a lot of fat. Fat can be stored super easy. You've got limited vegetables and tubers and some stuff like that. Like some of the northern Scandinavian climates, if you look at what they did in the past, because I always wonder, like, how the hell do you get vitamin D living in, like, up with reindeer in like Finland? And what they would do is they would take mushrooms and they would dry them. So as Lonnie and everybody knows, you take mushrooms, you dry them, and you get D2. And then they would add them to soups and stuff like all winter. Like D2 is pretty fast acting, but if you're consuming it every day, every other day, or multiple times a week, you can kind of get by through that period of time. Your D3 levels are probably pretty high before you go into that period. So I think there is some interesting things with that. I mean, it's kind of one of the reasons I use short periods of intermittent fasting, work up to a 15 to 24 hour fast once a week, and people that want better body comp, and sometimes, they don't want to drop their performance, just try to get the body to shift and, use fat during that period of time. Yes, it's an easy way of cutting out, calories and that type of thing too. So it's just, the average person doesn't have any of that type of stimulus. They're eating a lot of, generally higher carbohydrate foods, but they're stuffing them into a system that's not like Phil doing boxing for 2.5 hours. They're not necessarily needing all those carbohydrates either, which, like when you were talking, Lonnie, about the argument of health, I just see what the FDA is doing. On one hand, I applaud them for trying to do something to disseminate better information to people. But on the other hand, to me, it seems like a stupid idea that's never going to go anywhere, because you're trying to solve, to me, an output issue with an input. To me, health is an output of what you put into the system, and then you have to measure blood markers, performance, VO2 max, something like that, to try to get your hands around it. And they're trying to just say, if we only put in these inputs only for everyone, then they're going to be healthy. Like, to me, you take that money and just spend it on better education and let people kind of make their own choices. Because I just have this fear of the food industry then is going to be like, come up with some crazy new food that meets all the criteria and then put the healthy stamp on it. And, we would all look at it and go, what the fuck is that? That doesn't make any sense,
Yes, exactly.
They're all back to where we started again.
Yeah, we're going to have some kind of jar of paste that just has everything you need. Well, on the back,
nutrient paste.
Yeah, I think a big part of it too is we all we have doubt, and we're right to have doubt in what they say, because we all lived through the margarine generation and things that, which gives us huge doubt, because they pushed that shit like crazy on us and told us that's what we need to do. And what did we learn? Oops, we fucked up, guys. We probably shouldn't have told you to do that. And how many times have they done that to us? And the newer generation, they have not come to the conclusions. It takes time. It takes decades to come to these conclusions on what they were pushing, for them to realize they were wrong. And we're old enough to see a few of those.
Yeah, remember. We remember.
Yeah, we remember. Really? We're going to trust you? After you did this to us?
Eggs are bad. Eggs are good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You remember the stuff about eggs? They were trying to relate egg intake to so many cigarettes a day. And you're like, no, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Or to your point, Phil, the new generation, and, I'm a curmudgeon now, but you see a lot of marketing to sort of Gen Zers, I guess, that, hey, high in plant proteins. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, that bad, huh? Those are incomplete proteins. You have to eat more. You have to eat a wider variety to try to get the similar anabolic effects. And I mean, I'm painting with a broad brush here, but by blasting that out as a health message, like, this is all good because, it's the trend to say a plant-based diet. But man, you're applying that to something that I just think we need some education here for the people who haven't haven't seen trends like that come and go. That's a corporate, that's a marketing tool, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem is, that's always the problem in these studies. It's like, okay, where's the money coming from? Where's the funding for this study? Because sadly it is skewed. There's not, rightly so. You need funding. Like, studies won't get done without funding. Like, Elon's not just going to give somebody $1 billion to do whatever the fuck they want. They generally have an agenda. So, that's understandable, but you have to have an open eye to that and realize that you're looking through somebody's specific lens. So.
And then what happens if they have new data? Like, we've all been around long enough to see, if you're actually looking at the actual data, that it's actually changed.
Yes.
And so you take 5-10 years just to get people into X is healthy, and then, you've got a bunch of new studies that show, oops, maybe 30% of that is wrong.
Yes.
And then you have the exact same thing that happened to all of us of like, oh, they said this, and then it's actually this, because the average person is not going to read the studies, which I totally get, versus, hey, here's a picture of what we believe currently is healthy. Oh, and by the way, this will change over time, but this is the best stab we have right now, so do this and you'll be good, versus this is the healthy thing forever. And then when it changes, people are rightfully pissed. They're like, wait a minute, you said that was healthy, now it's not. What the hell's going on?
Yeah. Well, that's with everything. It's an understanding that...
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think we all have an understanding that science is not, like, forever fact. It's like, here's what we know right now.
Yeah.
This is probably going to change because we're going to learn more. Like, it's ongoing forever. Like, this will never stop. And, we're always going to get new evidence, and you better be fluid and ready to adjust with that. So, hell, we've seen that in the strength and conditioning field. Like, how many people get married how many coaches have we seen, like, they get something they believe in, and then they refuse to fucking change their mind with new evidence? It's like,
well, that's the problem with corporatizing stuff, right?
Yeah.
Is that once you embrace something heavily, it's hard to change your conclusions once you say this is the new rules for all lifting.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Because it's going to change.
Yeah, it is. But,
and you've painted yourself into a corner then.
And you're just too invested to change a little bit. So,
right.
But.
And I have a shameless plug for, if people want the latest on sports supplement and nutrition, they can come to the International Society of Sports Nutrition.
Everybody should go to that. That was fun.
Yeah.
That was one of the best ones I've been to.
Yeah, it's actually super fun. I know Lonnie said he'll be there this year, and it'll be June 15th through the 17th, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And then I'll be doing a talk, actually a primer on the use of psychedelics, what are some of the current research, and then our psychedelics supplements next. And then, are you doing a talk, Lonnie, or not? I can't remember. You're just hanging out.
Not this year. No, that coffee paper we were working on, that's enough. That's enough for me.
Yeah, and that turned out really good. I can't say anything else until it's public, but it was very, very well done.
Yes.
All right, well, sorry about the going nuts on the nutrition stuff.
No, it's good. The only thing I wanted to touch on is because I've been thinking about this with the training I got going on.
Was that a pun? Going nuts on the nutrition stuff?
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Someone picked
Pretty
that
good
up.
stuff.
Lonnie's secretly getting funded by the nut board. Got those almond checks coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big money from cashews.
Yeah.
Not after what I just said about plant-based proteins sucking.
No, I was thinking about older populations. I've trained a lot of. There was a time there I was training like 370-plus-year-olds to powerlifting meets, and then recently I've started boxing, and then my 73-year-old father started boxing with me, which has got me more thinking about. And he's done some strength stuff with me recently too. And it was thinking about how do we train aging populations, because there's numerous things we lose, and one of them is just pure strength, and then another is speed and agility and mobility and things like that. And So what's the hierarchy here? Because one thing I've noticed with him, he's in impeccable shape for a 73-year-old because he does strength training and things like that. But in a month's time or 3 weeks, whatever he's been at it, we're seeing drastic changes in his like ability to move, like balance and things like that. Because in boxing, you're constantly shifting from, if you're doing it right, you're shifting from one side to the other on purpose. You know, you throw a right to set up the left and you have to be able to do that. And that was really tough for him in day one, because he just hadn't done that in life. He hasn't done, I don't know what you'd call young people stuff in a while. Like when you're young, you're bouncing around and doing crazy shit all the time, and you gain that ability. And I lost some of that, and I've seen it greatly increase in me. But you know, it had me thinking about, okay, what's the hierarchy if I take, you know, if an average 70-some-year-old comes off the street and, like, I know they're losing this speed and agility and balance, and we need to train that, but, you know, most of them are super weak already, so is it beneficial to try and train that stuff, or should we just concentrate on pure strength for a while to be able to do that? And of course, like anything else, that's going to be dependent on the individual. But, I mean, my guess in general would probably be the average 70-plus-year-old is just weak. So prior to us doing any, like, speed, dynamic work, mobility work, like, we just have to get them to be able to locomote their own ass in a simple way.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, you know, Phil, I saw a bunch of data last year about after your 40s, you lose about 8% of your muscle mass a decade. That's just sort of a broad brush sarcopenia, you know, number. But that would make sense if your engine gets smaller and smaller. And I know that, you know, Mike's seen this stuff too. If you don't train speed, you're not going to just automatically be explosive with lots of, you know, high like rate of force development and time to peak power and all the stuff that we used to measure in that coffee research. There was an older track coach, and he and I would do occasional speed work because it was just lighter weight and you could do explosive stuff. And we could out accelerate some of the guys on the football team, which was kind of surprising, and sort of gratifying. Like, yeah, you punks, you know. But that's because I just think it's specificity. If you don't train a system, you're not going to get the output, like Mike was saying, kind of about inputs, outputs. But
then I have safety concerns too. Oh, go ahead. I can keep this.
I was going to say, I mean, in terms of movement, it's like your capability of it. And I remember we used to do a lot of this because my ex-phys professor was kind of involved with a lot of this stuff. But fast twitch, isn't that like basically the first to go, essentially, in terms of your muscle quality over time? Yes. And which has a lot to do with your balance and your speed in general. So like having the ability to like just do something strength oriented to a point, I guess. I mean, you don't want to train like so much strength that you're very stiff in that kind of range of motion or whatever. Kind of like, I mean, like I would just say like geared powerlifting kind of. Not that we have 70-year-olds doing geared powerlifting. I just in terms of the stiffness of your, you know, joints and stuff. But you have to have some basis there of strength to just have the activation of those fast twitch fibers. Then adding like an element like that, like, you know, a boxing or a movement type of thing where you are using that. It's like, you know, essentially strength is it's like building strength is like learning the word, and then moving is like learning to use it in a sentence.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like the order of operations that I've always felt like it went, especially with the clients that I have with kind of what they do. And where we see a lot of problems. Like, I mean, I've had similar clients who they do strength training stuff so they can keep running. Like they want to like run as their primary fitness thing.
Yeah.
And strength training just helps them get back to that. Without the strength part of it, they get the knee injuries, the ankle, hip, back stuff that causes them issues.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to get with as far as the safety concerns I had, because we see this in like what would they, functional fitness or whatever has become big, and it always has been for a little while here. But so I see people take even kids and like sport kids, and what are we going to do? We're going to make them run this and do hurdles and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, some of these kids are weak as shit, and they don't realize that, like, when you do force production and like fast change of direction and things like that, the forces you're putting on joints and muscles is many times greater than just weightlifting. You know, if you have some kid jump off a box or run a sprint and like plant a foot and change 90-degree direction, like the amount of force on there, especially a kid or an older person in this situation that like is just weak as shit, like you've just applied a ton of force that they're not ready for, you know? And so that's where it's almost leaning toward, like I said, you have to look at the individual, because everybody individual is different. I know some 70-some-year-olds that are in good shape strength-wise, but maybe they're losing that. So in those cases, maybe we could move right to some type of dynamic training, because that's their main lack. But I have to feel that if I looked at the average population of 70-plus-year-olds or whatever, like I would probably just have to have them do basic, simple, super simple strength training to start and build up some kind of base so they're allowed to do dynamic training. But the weird thing to me is, like, that functional fitness or whatever, like, lifting weights always gets a bad name. Like, nobody thinks functional fitness crap is unsafe, but everybody thinks lifting weights is unsafe. Mm-mm. When it's actually super simple. And like, I could easily injure a 70-year-old by, okay, let's go to the track, buddy. We're going to do this. And just let's fucking sprint and jump. And he's wrecked, you know, and I blow joints and shit. Like, I've seen more, like, most of the people I know get injured doing shit like that, not lifting weights. They're out, like, I have weightlifters that'll go join a softball team or some shit, and they tear a hamstring. And they're lifting nothing.
All the time.
You know, yeah. So
pickleball, oof.
Yeah, it's
Achilles
like, so,
and hamstrings popping.
Yeah, so and like, hell, one of my athletes that's not old, she's like 26, blew her freaking Achilles dancing. And not in the gym, you know, she's not in the gym doing strongman shit, and that's what she competes in. It was literally dancing. But yet, like, strength training is seen as this most dangerous thing in the world. So I don't know. It just had me thinking. But I mean, then again, I think on my end, I probably have. Basically, it was eye opening for me. I think I probably have ignored in some of my older populations this type of training, because I'm so strength focused. And it's like, okay, maybe I need to add a little more of that stuff in. And I was watching a neat video this morning. Some trainer goes to these old folks homes and stuff. And the way he was getting them in shape was fun games. Nice. They were like rolling balls across the table, and they had to catch them and move around. Like, he'd want to be to the right, want to be to the left, and just teaching them how to move again. You know, because that's like moving quickly is a skill that we lose. And even eye control. Like, that's one thing I've noticed with me. My hand-eye coordination has, over the last month and a half, has increased greatly. We have those stupid little bags that you punch, and it's on a rope, or it's on 2 bungee cords. And I punched that thing, and it came back and hit me in the fucking face the first time. And now I can sit there for minutes and blast on the thing. And my reaction time and my hand-eye coordination has gone up drastically. And like I said, I've seen the same thing in a greater magnitude in my father, who is 30 years older than me or whatever he is. You know, of course, he's lost more of that because he's much older than me. And so the gain back seems quicker. But
you know, Phil, this is it's kind of a tangent, but one of the things I've noticed, I've been lifting at Planet Fitness. I'm not kidding, because I need to be able to go do something when I travel and that kind of stuff. But about a quarter of the gym, not even 10-15% is a free weight area. And this kind of, to your point about, like, when you're talking about reclaiming some of this, I think it's because you've done barbell stuff your whole life, not these machines that comprise like 80% of a Planet Fitness. Jarrell actually got me thinking about that. which is, this sort of stiffness you get. Like when all you're doing is stuff like a seated hamstring curl machine or a partial range of motion bench press. I've noticed my forearms are smaller because I'm not holding weight so much anymore.
Yeah.
It's just, it's disturbing, like that corporate influence on fitness, because they're doing it probably like you're saying, Phil, like they deem it as safer. You can't drop a weight, when it's a stupid machine and this very, sagittal plane that barely moves. Yeah. It's just, I don't know, it's just sort of disturbing. And think about how much worse those people would be. They think they're actually fit, but they go try to do anything like what you're talking about, managing their own body weight or a free-floating object like a dumbbell or a barbell, and then they can't do it.
Well, yeah, and they lose all motor control. Like, they don't know how to, they can do the leg press or the leg extension machine so many times, but they literally don't have the ability to do that when you start mixing in balance. Because there is no balance in that situation. So, like, stimulus. Squat down to that bench. I can't fucking do it because I don't know how. I've lost that ability, that motor control. That's what you see. Some older people, like, they walk off a curb and they've lost that ability, some small step or something, and they'll fall. And that's something I think that needs to be trained in life. Possibly you can mix some of that in. Like Dan John does a great thing with his carries and things like that. I'm a huge proponent of carries. Like, hey, here you go, old person. Take this 20-pound dumbbell and walk with it. It can be simple things, but to start.
Yeah, and that brings up the transfer issue too. Like, if you have someone who's really good at squatting, like on day one, they may not leg press the most amount of weight, but with over 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, they'll probably progress extremely fast on that lift versus someone who can leg press a ton and then they go to squat. Mm-hmm. Like, that just doesn't transfer as well. And again, something is better than nothing, right? Yeah. So doing strength-based stuff, if you're older and you've never done anything, great, go for it. That's going to be much better than nothing. But I think there's something where people think that's the end. Like, I don't want to use those dumbbells or those, things that are unstable. That's not safe. It's like, no, maybe you start on some machine stuff, and then when you get more comfortable with that, like, add a little bit of motor control and instability into it, especially for upper body stuff, because you're going to be carrying stuff that doesn't want to cooperate in the real world, and you're not going to be moving it perfectly.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. And that's another thing, like that's a big argument against barbell training, things like that, is how unsafe it is because of the stability and things. But, like, real life is infinitely less stable than barbell training.
Even the barbell.
On a daily basis, you're going to be in a much less stable situation than that. So, I mean, it could actually help. And I guess, that kind of does answer my question. I mean, we kind of are working mobility and stability and some dynamic effort. But, like I said, I'm seeing this because in myself, like in boxing training, I can comfortably say I am the strongest person in that gym. But I am not the hardest hitter in that gym. Because I'm very good at producing force against a barbell, but they are, like, infinitely better at producing force in a punch and how to do that. Now, I have gotten drastically better. Like, we saw that this week. I was working mitts with my coach, and he's like, "Holy shit, you've gotten a lot better," because now I've learned that skill of taking the power I have and being able to apply it in a different way. But
you have a base of muscle to work from. Right. Yeah. So back to your original question, it depends on if you're, a very frail 80-year-old that has no muscle. Yeah, working a little bit on speed and coordination, I think, is good, but you've got to generate and add and keep some muscle to create more force, right? Because if you have a bigger cross-sectional area, you just have a greater potential in order to do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's the hard part with a lot of recommendations is people then go too far onto one end, right? So you've got someone who has very little muscle mass and you're just doing all this kind of weird speed stuff with them. Yeah, that's beneficial for the short period, but long term, they need to add a little bit of muscle and keep as much as possible so they have something to actually create speed and power with.
I was just going to say, I noticed this with just jiu-jitsu stuff for the most part, like just the culture of it. It's difficult to kind of put into terms. I will say the Brazilian jiu-jitsu culture is starting to come around to some strength training, but it's like one of the only fight cultures I think is almost like actively opposed to strength training in a way, almost in the same way as like baseball used to be and like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who are stronger, like without any base, right? If you had, 10 people and you had a few of them out of that group who had a base of strength, like they did strength training before or whatever, they tend to progress faster. And part of it's just that neural connection is like, yeah, you haven't done this specific movement, but you've paved some roads in that neural system. Like you've paved some, pathways, and like, getting them to adjust is going to happen a little bit faster than someone who's never paved anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it just kind of depends so the people who join who are like really weak, I see them really struggle for a long time. Like they can get good. Like there are some dudes who are really good who are super weak, and it actually pisses me off, to be honest, but like, but they spend a long time doing just that. And it's like, if they got stronger at some point in the process, and some of it's just time, that's like their thing they do instead of working, lifting or whatever. But a little bit of strength would help them so much. The other part is just their GPP is really low. Like they're good, but they'll roll a couple times and then be gassed, and they can't recover between sets. Like they just really struggle to do that.
Yeah. Well, and then I've lost what I was going to say before, but because you made me think of something else. But well, and that's like in like my daughter in wrestling this year. She had zero wrestling background, but she had a big strength background, and she automatically like moved up to varsity as a freshman because she was stronger. She was able to. She wasn't a great wrestler, but she was stronger than some great wrestlers, which got her out of many bad situations. And that's like me. My sparring match last week was against a current boxer that has a bunch of fights, whereas I have zero fights. I've sparred before, and he hit me in the face I don't know how many times. But the one good punch I did get in, he got himself in a bad position, and I automatically went to a hook to the body and shut him the fuck down. Like, I got a puncher's chance just because I'm fucking strong. And, but no, what I was going to get to was like the speed and stuff is like the problem with speed with the older populations is what if, and we talked about this before the show happened, what if Sally comes to me and we all agree like speed work should be done probably somewhere in between 40 and 60%. Like, what if 40 to 60% is like 25% of her body because she's so weak? If her 100% is literally standing up, I'm an asshole for trying to make her do speed things because she's doing speed at 100% of her ability, which is less than optimal. No, it's not speed, and it's less than optimal. It's super unsafe. We're literally having her try and do fast things that like it'd be like me doing speed work at a 700-pound squat. Not a good idea. And that's where we have to ID that stuff. I mean, it's like if this person's base is so low, if the number one rule of strength coach is do no harm, I'm trying to do harm to them. Like, I need to just build that up and get some real world basic strength going on with probably some pretty basic moves. I can't tell you how many older people I've come in and literally like, okay, you're going to sit on the chair, you're going to stand up. And that was our workout. And it was tough, but you also quickly graduate from that. So,
yeah. I mean, my kind of biased solution to that, and something I've added too, is a K-box or a flywheel.
Mm-hmm.
So for people who are not familiar, there's a little wheel that spins on a cable in a box you kind of stand on. But when you're doing, let's say, just a simple bicep curl, and as you're curling up on the concentric, the wheel's spinning one direction, And then the second you change, you have a high amount of an eccentric load that's kind of pulling you back down the other way. And the cool part is you can adjust, obviously, the size of the flywheel so you can make it easier or harder. And then within that, it's responsive to how fast you're pulling it. So if I do a bicep curl faster, the eccentric component is going to be much heavier. So the person can control the speed at which they're doing it, and that'll also control the speed of the eccentric. The nice part I like about it is that you can adjust it to a wide variety of people very easily, but you're always getting that kind of, for lack of a better word, overspeed on the eccentric.
Mm-hmm.
But in my biased opinion, it's a way of kind of training for speed that's very controllable in a safe manner. And you could do a squat, you could do a Zercher, you could do all sorts of different lifts with it. And I have no disclosures with them, but I think it's kind of a cool way to get a different stimulus that you're trying to get closer to that speed component, and something that's very easy to scale per person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mike, that's very reminiscent of what I saw at that NASA conference. Like
Oh yeah,
those kind of flywheel types of things are.
Yeah.
That's what they're looking at with a lot of trying to combat the muscle loss in space flight and stuff, because it's not some huge machine. It doesn't. Because if you think about it, it's a completely different topic. But how do you get resistance in space? And that was one of the cool things.
yeah.
Well, and I mean, it makes sense. And that's like, we've kind of poo-pooed machines to a point here. But like, in some of these populations, that might be the only choice.
Oh, yeah.
Because literally we need to make them stronger with a machine to be able to move their own ass in space.
Yeah.
Safely. So, and you see that in rehab situations too.
Yeah.
I mean, those are, somebody's so injured that, like, literally before we can unleash you onto the world to live, we need to do this little machine to build strength. So, just to handle the world. So,
yeah. It made me think of when you guys are talking, like, as older guys, if you're going to move these men and women into speed work and you don't want to just tear stuff, that preconditioning portion, something like flywheel work or, other types of things, probably a great way to do that. Maybe add in a couple more weeks than you might. I know their baseline fitness and their whole athletic history or all this stuff comes into play. But you would think that, somebody in their 70s, you might want to add a week or 2 or 3 of just getting their ducks in a row before you have them put them in a boxing ring.
Well, yeah, and I could almost argue, like, somebody, let's say we have a 75-year-old that used to be an elite athlete. They're almost more of a danger to themselves than a regular person.
Oh yeah, strong enough
because
to hurt
they
themselves.
they are wired to still be able to do what they did in their 20s. They mentally know they have that ability, and they can, holy shit, they can turn that on, but their body is, like, not ready for it anymore. Like my dad, he moved in, it was over here with my son, and my son was out jumping on the trampoline. He was trying to teach him how to do a backflip. And next thing I know, I look out the window and my dad's on the trampoline, and the fucker did a backflip at 73 years old. I told my wife he's going to do something stupid. He's going to do something stupid, and what does he do? He does a fucking backflip.
Nice.
And luckily he walked out of this thing, but I was like, this is going to be bad. And because he hadn't done that shit in years, but he's still wired to do it because that's what he did. And it's like,
maybe that's luck.
Realize how dangerous. Yes, I think it is. But
because you know what? I know an old professor, Mike knows him. I'm not going to say him by name. He was a gymnast for many, many years, and he told me a story. He's like, I was there on the beach, and I thought I would just do some hand walking and stuff, and I just collapsed and just ate, bent my neck and ate the sand. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah, that's the problem. They still have that. And, like, I catch myself doing that now because of my orthopedic injuries and stuff. I have to, like, I don't just jump out of the back of a big truck anymore. I can't because I have that. I know it's like, yeah, you could do that before, but like I start measuring things. Is it worth it? Probably not. You're not 20 anymore. So.
And to that end, I'm a huge fan of the triphasic training, which is obviously from Cal Dietz, and I'm biased because I'm helping him with the second version of the book, which is all new stuff. But just simply taking 2 weeks of doing, some eccentric based overload, 2 weeks of isometric pause stuff and then 2 weeks of faster concentric stuff. And obviously he's got loading there for high level athletes, but you can scale that all the way back down to whatever you're doing with people and just take those concepts, because especially in older populations and especially people who used to be athletes, they understand what you're trying to do, but that eccentric component really hasn't been trained for a long period of time. And you just, like we're saying, you just need that ability to absorb force first. One of my online clients, he's in his 40s, and he's working at doing better on, some agility stuff and some, rec sports he wants to play. Yeah, we just did some basic strength training with him. He's a pretty strong guy. And then, did some, triphasic stuff for a while first. And then we'll phase him into, change of direction work, because you want that base to not only hopefully reduce the risk of injury, but to, when you do form stuff, be able to actually hold the position from learning the motor pattern and not being limited by you're just not strong enough to be able to do it.
So. All right, guys. Well, we'll call it a day.
Cool.
Good show.
Yeah.
Good having you around, Lonnie. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, love it. Love it.
So, all right,
All right,
I'm gonna go squat.
What?
See ya.
Talk to you later.
The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.